in the flesh down the road here on the high street at the VC Gallery, where we're going to touch on this a little bit later on, but the atmosphere there was brilliant.
Oh, it's a wonderful place. But as you say, let's talk about that a bit later.
Yeah, one other thing that we got to talk about, it wasn't all fun and frolics. The news had just broken about the Hildar Health Board's decision on emergency surgery at Withybush. And you've been trying to dispel, well, not dispel, you've been trying to give the facts on what that means. So can you reiterate to us a little bit, a few days later, we've been able to read the documents and find out exactly what's happening?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the first thing to say is that politicians are not in charge of how health is delivered. You absolutely wouldn't want somebody like me deciding how much you spend on an ingrowing toenail, how much you spend on a dementia, and how much you spend on hernias. You've got to have clinicians and experts deciding that. So what you do is we've appointed boards to run these things, and decisions about clinical safety, they can't be political. They've got to be based on professional advice from clinicians and training bodies and royal colleges. And our job then is to make sure that we provide, as far as possible, the means for them to deliver the job. So our priority is to make sure that we have services that are safe, that we set a budget. They've got to be sustainable services. So if they're not available all the time, what does that mean for the public? Ideally, we want to see them as local as possible, but also we want to make sure that the workforce exists to deliver them. So that's quite a lot to balance, and that's the job of the health board, to balance that. So just in terms of what's happening in Pembrokeshire, look, there was a lot of gossip and rumour around that the emergency department was going to close, and that's absolutely not true. In fact, this gossip and rumour happens before every single election. Isn't that funny, Tom? But the thing to be clear about is that the emergency department in Withybush is not stopping. What the health board's suggesting, and really it's up to them to try and explain this, it shouldn't be for me, but they're talking about transferring general surgery to Glangwili. Now that's a much narrower category of surgery. What they tell me is around 5 people a week undergo this emergency surgery. Now I get that for those 5 people that is really serious. So we absolutely need some answers from the health board in terms of, right, what actually counts as emergency general surgery? How many cases are affected? Why can't this continue safely in Withybush? What's the problem? Is it workforce shortage? Is it money? Have they failed to recruit? And what happens if you are in an emergency situation? How do you actually get to Glangwili? Because, I'd want to make sure that they can get there in an emergency vehicle. So I think we need some really clear answers from the health board before we see any of this happening. And of course, the thing to remember is that in relation to that, that they need to make sure that they can deliver and meet those clinical standards consistently 365 days a year. And the crazy thing about last week was that actually there's quite a lot of good things that they could have been talking about. So when it comes to orthopedics, that's your kind of bones and things, then actually more provision is going to be in Withybush. There'll be more cancer care delivered locally. Diagnostics is going to be expanded from 5 to 7 days a week. The same day emergency care service is expanding. And on top of that, critical care is still there. Emergency diagnostics is still there. Outpatients and daycare is still there. Screening services. There's a whole host of things that absolutely are still there. So let's just be clear. This is not a hospital being shut down. In fact, more investment has gone into Withybush in the past few years than in many, many years. And part of the issue, I think, is because Withybush is finding it difficult to recruit and get the specialists and expertise. So, look, I think the health board's got to do a much better job at communicating with the public and letting them know exactly what's going on, why there's a problem. I was speaking to hematologist consultant there recently. He was like a blood expert. And he was saying, listen, I'm retiring soon and I can't get anyone to replace me. And they've tried and they've advertised and they've tried and tried and tried. In the end, he had to go over to India to find someone. They've managed to convince this guy to come to Pembrokeshire, and now we've got to keep him. And you know, don't forget, at the moment, there's a lot of talk about, you know, do we want immigrants and stuff? We need to attract these people to places like Pembrokeshire because it's really hard to recruit. There's going to be 10 million shortage of health workers in the world by 2030. So we're competing globally for this.
I know that you posted a link to the Health Board's website on your social media, and I imagine what you've just explained there, it can all be found there. But as you say, it would be nice to have clearer communications direct from the Health Board as to when these decisions come through.
Yeah, and I've been speaking to the chair about that, about, look, they need to up their game when it comes to communication because, you know, a lot of people, I understand, are really upset and stressed about this and they're not getting clarity. And what does that mean? What does it mean if you have an accident and you get to Withybush and then you need emergency services? What exactly happens? And I think they need an explanation. They need much, much more clarity on what happens and why they're doing it.
Yeah. If you just joined us, it's our weekly catch-up with our representative in the Senedd of Mid and West Wales. If you have a question for our representative in the Senedd, then you can ask that in the questions. Good morning to Jonathan. You can put your question in the comments to us as well. And we're looking forward then. Well, you were out on the weekend. We saw pictures and there's by-elections taking place at the moment. There's been an impact where the nominations have been put in, someone's withdrawn. What impact does that have on local democracy and people trying to vote for the party that best aligns with them when that's no longer available for them?
Yeah, this is a really difficult situation for, I think, everybody concerned. We had a Labour candidate who's fairly well known locally, I think, in Hakin and Milford Haven area. And it's a woman who's done incredible work in the community and a really strong woman. And actually what happened was that her son was bullied by a couple of, you know, older adults. 14-year-old son was bullied by, and she wanted to protect, and the reason given, the reason they were bullying is because her mum was there. Their mum was standing as a Labour candidate. And her instinct, of course, is to protect her children. And so she's withdrawn. And I just think there's a lesson here for all of us. Look, you cannot have a situation where people are intimidated for whatever reason out of standing for public office. And that's the situation we're in today. It is not acceptable on any level. And obviously, I'm very disappointed. The thing is that the names have already gone in, so it's difficult to withdraw the names. But look, I understand her instinct for wanting to protect her child.
Mm-hmm. Those elections taking place 7th of March, if my memory serves me correct. So if you're on that ward area, you can find your list of candidates on the council website and you can get your votes in for who you want to be your representative at Pembrokeshire County Council. Wary of the time that we've got here this morning, Eluned, but I know that there was a few other things that you wanted to dispel around the country and the area specifically. So let's have a quick little jump into these. There's been comments made about Nation of Sanctuary. Now, we've to do with hotels being packed with asylum seekers. Of course, we've had our brush with this, with Penally a couple of years ago being used to house different people from different regions. What is the actual fact around that?
Well, let me give you a little quiz then, Tom. How many asylum seekers do you think are in hotels in Pembrokeshire?
Oh, gosh.
Let me tell you the answer. The answer is none. The answer is none. How many do you think are in Carmarthenshire? None. Ceredigion? None. You know, this is a myth. And the point is that across the whole of Wales, I think we have about now 16 or so family units who are in one hotel in Cardiff. So I do think that we need to get some sense of scale on what's happening. And the other thing I think is probably worth putting straight is this nation of sanctuary that people are using as a little bit of a battering ram. Now, the fact is that 91% of the budget for that is being spent on Ukrainians. And obviously today we're noting 4 years since the beginning of that war. People in Wales opened their hearts and their communities and their homes to these people. And this represents 0.05% of the entire Welsh budget. So I just think some perspective on this and helping people who are fleeing from war is important, in particular those in Ukraine. And also, don't forget, there's those Afghan military personnel who helped our people, translators and such. They're also getting some of this money. So it's a tiny amount of money, and I think we're doing the right thing.
And then, well, you kind of answered to do with the budgets there. But looking at money, there's upcoming elections coming up. That's why we're getting a lot of comments around things that we're posting with a political nature. The expansion of the Senedd is costing a significant amount of money. Bureaucracy we can't afford. What are your thoughts on these new elections coming up and the different boundaries and the increase in size of the Senedd?
Well, you've got to remember when the Senedd was set up in 1999, it had almost no powers. Today, it controls health, education, transport, taxation, a £28 billion budget, and yet it's the same size as it was in 1999. We've seen a reduction in the number of Welsh MPs, partly because actually the shift has happened to the Senedd. That's where the power is now on so many of those areas. And I think what's important once again is to recognize the tiny, tiny proportion of money that is spent on this compared to that massive budget. So again, we're talking about 0.1% or so. So it's a tiny amount of money. And do you know what? There are 10 councils in Wales that have 60 members or more. So the Senedd has fewer members than 10 councils in Wales, and obviously we have a lot more power. And we're getting to a point today where literally, if 2 people are ill, you can't run a committee. So there's a really practical issue that I think needs to be addressed. So bad laws cost money. Having people scrutinise us actually is good value for the taxpayer, because it makes us work better. So there's plenty of evidence to back that up.
Emma is with us over on Facebook. I'm just going to invite Emma to look back at the beginning of this interview at social media or listen back on the catch-up. And this is looking at the Senedd when it comes to ensuring adequate health services to provide in Pembrokeshire, responsibility Senedd. You mentioned about the health boards being appointed to do that and look at the website. And you also gave a list of things that also have been said in that last report. And also Jennifer picking up on a point that was mentioned, I think it was last week or the week before, to do with the new transport and the train stations, when they're going to be actioned in Milford, Pembroke and Tenby. Any details on that?
So, last week we got this £14 billion announcement, so that was huge. But, let's be honest, it's going to take a while to get all that sorted out. So this is a 15-year project, so it won't be happening overnight. But we'll have to get that into, you think about planning permission, you have to get all the designs and everything. This is not a quick process, but the key thing was we needed to get it into a pipeline, and it wasn't in a pipeline before, and now it is. So it will be happening. But yeah, I'm afraid people will have to be patient in relation to any big construction work. Takes a while.
And well, thank you very much for your time here again this morning. Lynn Morgan, member of Senedd for Mid and West Wales. On Friday, you were at the VC Gallery. You started off briefly mentioning that. Of course, Barry's birthday then on Saturday. You didn't anticipate that you'd be singing him happy birthday the day before. But what a wonderful place. And maybe give us a bit of insight as to who you're going to be seeing this week.
So I've had a very busy weekend. So yeah, as you say, Haverfordwest, the VC Gallery. Then I went campaigning in Milford Haven area. Sunday I went up to North Wales, and Monday really pleased to announce building a new hospital up in North Wales. And so that was something. And we actually had our cabinet meeting up there, and also met lots of people who are in training for renewable energy jobs. So again, we've got these renewable energy jobs. They're coming thick and fast, and we need to train up our young people ready to take advantage of those.
There you go. Eluned Morgan, thank you so much for your time here this morning. I know your calendar will be full to the brim.
And don't forget, it's St. David's Day this weekend. I know there'll be all kinds of things like the St. David's Day parade. So I hope people will take advantage of those. And I think we talked a bit about that last week, didn't we, Tom?
We did last week. We mentioned on that. So Haverfordwest County, they've got a schools football festival taking place on Thursday, and their match against Flint Town is actually on St. David's Day. They're going to have a real family fun day, bouncy castles, Mamgi Welsh cakes are going to be there. We're going to be there providing some Welsh language music with Menter Iaith. So that's on Sunday. On Saturday, I'm going to be in Oriela Park with the Pembrokeshire Coast National Park Authority looking at clay, and yes, celebrating all that is to be Welsh and St. David's. And of course, the St. David's Day parade through Haverfordwest taking place on Friday, featuring a number of local schools. So looking forward to sharing that on our social media. Also, Eluned Morgan, thank you very much. Enjoy the celebrations in the run-up to St. David's Day this Sunday.
Diolch yn fawr iawn.
We played the best earlier. We've got another track for yours to play coming up.
Yeah, Mika, big girls, you are beautiful, and I'm so happy. I've got tickets to go and see him. He's coming. He's coming to Wales. He's coming to Cardiff. So I've managed to bag some tickets. I was on the website, so that's great news.
I'm very jealous. What a showman! It's gone 25 minutes past 8 o'clock. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Diolch.
Get your annual pass today for unlimited